morning, folks. How are you all doing? Great, great. Good to hear that. This is a panel on Metaverse, so I'm really glad to see us all in person rather than in Metaverse somewhere, no pun intended. Metaverse is a hot topic these days, and in the panel today, we want to be able to talk about what Metaverse is, debate a little bit, but eventually we want to talk about what are the use cases that are driving the Metaverse, what technology enablers we need, and so on. But Metaverse is a huge topic today. There are believers, non-believers. Some believe it's a distant future. Some believe it's here now. So I want to start the panel by posing a question to the audience here. With a show of hands, how many of us believe that Metaverse is real? It's here now. There are use cases today that we can leverage. Quite a few people. And how many of us are non-believers, saying that it's a distant future, it's more of a hype than anything else? Quite a few. So clearly, this is a polarizing topic. And we have a very impressive panel today with many different point of views from AWS, from Cavernous, Real Events, Epic Games. And we want to be able to describe what Metaverse is, what are the myths. We want to debunk some of them. We'll talk about some real-world use cases for Metaverse, what the technology looks like, and what it's going to be, what technology it's going to take to really enable Metaverse. So by the way of introduction, I'm Divakar Bansal. I'm a GTM specialist in AWS EC2 accelerated computing team, and I work on AI machine learning and Metaverse technology for accelerated computing. My role here is basically twofold: to keep the panel discussion flowing, and then also to be your representative on the stage here and take your questions. I'm joined today by an impressive panel here of Metaverse influence and creators. First, I would like to introduce Anthony Duca, who's the co-founder and CEO of Cavernous Inc., an extended reality technology company enabling enterprises, brands, and creators to build immersive Metaverse experiences. Anthony.
Great. So I've been in the 3D technology industry for about 20 plus years, building enterprise 3D visualization software. And Cavernous is just a continuation of that life's work. In the past 6 years, we have built a scalable, extensible, and secure spatial computing platform that enables Metaverse as a service. And so we have services such as things like multi-user co-presence, voice and video streaming, persistence, synchronization. Many ways to access our platform. We have robust APIs and SDKs. We have a full-featured application that you can use to build, create a metaverse and deploy it at scale to any device. We also have integrations with game engines, and interestingly, we have a plugin for Unreal Engine where you can take any Unreal Engine application and turn it into an instant metaverse. Do we have any Unreal Engine developers in the house here? We got a couple, few. And we target enterprise brands and creators. If you want to learn more, check out our website. Come talk to me after.
Great, thanks, Anthony. And then we have Heiko Wengsel from Epic Games. Heiko is a director at Epic Games Unreal Engine organization, and he's the director there where he drives the development of next-gen data and visualization platforms for automotive and manufacturing use cases. Heiko.
Yep, hi, nice to be here. Quite an interesting journey. My background is a lot of content creation, CGI processes in the automotive industry. Quite a lot of things have happened in the last 13 years. We see a revolution now that's happening again with everything turning to real time, becoming highly interactive, using game engines in a space that usually shouldn't see a game engine. And what we're doing with Epic Games and Unreal Engine is like look at all those industry verticals, whether it's media, entertainment, automotive, architecture, games itself, and see like what can technology do. And on the background of the metaverse and everything changing in the way how we interact with data and processes, as well as how we collaborate with each other, we see our game engine as a core tool in that space. And so I look at like where the different industries, particularly my own vertical, are going, and how we can support with the products that we're creating of the entire ecosystem that Epic Games has to like support those initiatives, especially now with cloud computing and everything else that's going in the space. We're seeing a tremendous opportunity for new jobs and new skills, and they certainly are being emboldened and empowered by the discussion that's happening around the metaverse.
Great. We have Josh Rush. Josh is the co-founder and CEO of Real Events. He's passionate about helping clients realize their Metaverse vision by delivering technology for hybrid events and Metaverse experiences. Josh.
Yeah, glad to be here today. So Surreal really is, we say it's a Metaverse platform as a service. Our implementation is an Unreal Engine one. But Metaverse is kind of indicated by the 50-50 split on kind of where people sit in this audience is a bit of a pejorative, right? So it kind of means everything and it means nothing. And at the same time, we're really talking about creating rich digital interactive experiences where you can be co-present with people, online in real time. And so our team has been working on creating tools for agencies, brands, companies, developers that want to be able to quickly prototype and deploy and manage a multiplayer experience all through a pixel-streamed application that can deploy on an AWS cloud.
Thank you, Josh. And we have Evan Helda from AWS. He's a business development and strategy leader, spearheading business development, partnerships, and GTM strategy for all things AR, VR, and real-time 3D. Evan.
Thanks, Walker. Yeah, excited to be here, my first reInvent. So my role currently is twofold. One's customer-facing, finding partners like these guys to work with and help with go-to-market motions, help them build solutions for rendering and streaming and storing 3D data, and really just pulling together a big ecosystem of the best and brightest companies in this space, and then simultaneously taking that knowledge and learnings, turning back to our leadership team, our product teams, and defining what we're going to build to make this space real. There's a lot left to build. My background, I've been in the space about 6, 7 years. Started off at Meta, not the Facebook Meta, the OG Meta. We were more like the Oculus for AR, made an AR headset, had a very visionary founder that thought that AR was the key to building a more human and computer interface, and got really passionate about the power of immersive tech through that. That company suffered the demise of most Silicon Valley companies, so I went over to Improbable. Improbable is pretty interesting. They built out this back-end multiplayer networking technology to really power a metaverse, right? To go from 100 players in Fortnite to 10,000 players in one shared virtual world. And that CEO now the business has pivoted quite a bit, but they're still a leader in the space. And then now I'm here.
Great. Thanks, Evan. Thanks, panel. Now, let's talk about what Metaverse is. There seems to be no one single definition of Metaverse. Like in a very simplistic view, it's a third dimension to our 2D digital world. But there is a lot of taxonomy around it: AR, VR, NFT, crypto, real-time 3D, immersive tech, and so on. And we want to understand today what it means to be Metaverse. But one thing is certain, that Metaverse is going to create our existence through many devices, at many destinations, and through many experiences, so our physical world and digital worlds can merge together. So with that, I'm going to open the question to the panel here. Heiko, starting from you. What does Metaverse mean to you, and what do you think are the myths around Metaverse that we need to debunk?
So if we look at what has happened over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, is a tremendous shift from the way how we interact and consume digital data. And with coming from Epic Games, if we look what happened in the game space, how the big gaming platforms are turning into social platforms. The interactions that are happening there, the scale, the time that people spend with that space, how they identify and express themselves on these platforms, if you want to call it that, has changed tremendously. You mentioned it, right? Battle Royale, the idea that like 500 million people are consuming the same content, interacting with it in a very special way, some not even playing the game, creating new games inside it, has created a new space. And we see that with other platforms too, that are in the space and are fairly successful. And I think at the core, if you look what's happening, is that people go from the pure consumption of digital data to actively collaborating and interacting with it on all levels. And we see that moving into the industry space, where people see the future of how you interact with a brand has to become more collaborative. Like there's people that are interacting with you, that allow you to express yourself in a very specific way, interact with all the digital IP that's being created by these companies. Like we all, that we sit here, created tremendous amount of information and value. And people need to interact with that in a more valuable way. I mean, what we had in the past is like, me, myself, sit in front of a screen and I do things alone. I think the future and what the Metaverse represents the opportunity to interact and collaborate at any given stage that you interact with that digital data, whether it's in a professional or a private way, And so we have to prepare for what it means to create the tools, processes, and connectivity between all those pieces of digital IP and data to like make that a really good experience. And it's what people are craving for. There's so many creators, so many job opportunities in the space. And so they found this rallying cry under the metaverse to build that new extension of what we see today as the internet, but will be way more immersive and 3D based as what we see as the metaverse.
Great. Great. Josh, how are you guys looking at it from Surreal Events' perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we share many of the same kind of feelings that Heiko just expressed. I mean, I think for us, though, we think about, engagement, right? If we look at the way people interact with content online for the last 10 years, it's been a lot of kind of scrolling. And because of Metaverse, because of real-time 3D, and a lot of the tools that are out there now, we spend more time strolling. And we see that as sort of the next evolution of the internet, where you're actually virtually strolling through these websites, these experiences, you call it Metaverse. The other thing is co-presence, right? I mean, none of this really matters, I think, if we can't, do this in a way that we can connect with people in a way that's more valuable. In I think the social platforms over the last 15, 20 years, where we've had these massive, audience bases. We think that a lot of that opportunity to kind of bring down the experience to something more focused, maybe more curated, where you get to know your customer a bit more than just the data about them. We see this as like one of the big opportunities for Metaverse as well. The thing that at least inspires us to work with brands to create these more engaging, online, showrooms, activations, places where you can launch product. But it's, getting it to a point where now you have to think about what does it take to actually staff and operate, to maintain, constant improvement. All of these things they're brand new challenges for a new channel, which Metaverse is really. I mean, it's a place to engage. So there's a lot to learn, and I think that as Heiko said, there's plenty of opportunity for creation along the way. So yeah, we're just getting started.
Yeah. Evan, I'm going to move on to you and ask, some of these technologies have been around for a while. What are some of the biggest misconceptions around Metaverse? I know you also write a blog on Metaverse that's hugely popular. What are your thoughts on the topic?
I think the first big misconception is that Metaverse is just 3D and interactive immersive experiences. We've had that for a long time. We have that today. And if you define that as a Metaverse, things get pretty muddled pretty quickly. Fortnite's the Metaverse, Disney Plus is the Metaverse, Snap's the Metaverse, Nike 3D shopping's. How do we measure, how do we start to make smart capital allocation decisions with that definition? How do we measure the TAM with that definition? How do we know what's working and what bets are paying off with that definition? So I think we need to get way more precise about it. And the way I tried to define it, there's a technical definition, and then there's a philosophical way to think about it. Technically, I think about it in 3 layers. There's the infrastructure layer, and we're not there yet, right? We need way more compute farther out at the edge. We need new types of storage that can manage huge 3D maps of the world. We need 5G networks, which we've been lied to for years. They don't exist. We need bigger pipes and just more compute and storage. So that's the infrastructure layer. I'll talk more about what we're doing in that space later. And then there's the data layer. And this is where the shift happens. And it's an architectural shift, right? Today, we live in a world where you have n number of clients hooked into one database that's private, and it's not permissionless. You go into that, and you are a guest signing up for their terms of service, and you don't have any real impact on that world. I mean, you can in a sense, but there's nothing that you own. And so what's happening is a shift from n clients to one private database to n clients to X number of limitless databases that are open and permissionless, right? And why is that important? That leads to interoperability, right? Like today, LinkedIn is pretty valuable in a lot of ways. I got all my, certifications, my career, my identity, my picture. I can't do anything with that besides in LinkedIn, right? I'm locked into that. Whereas my CryptoPunk, right, it exists on this open ledger. And I can use it as my Twitter profile. I can use it in a game. I can use it to take out a loan. I can use it for a million different things. And that's interoperability.
Yep.
We don't have that today. And a lot of things flow from that, which I'll talk about later. The third thing is the experience layer. And people think that AR and VR is a metaverse. It's not. But it is a shift. It is spatial computing, right? It's this ability to interact with computers in a way that our minds have evolved to interact with the world and each other. And the powerful thing that I love about it is an example of people who are professional memorizers. And how do they retain information and communicate things? What they do is they think about a palace, it's a memory palace. And they think about where that card is in this drawer or upstairs. They're thinking spatially, and they have superpowers now. They can recall things. They're like robots now. And so that's the kind of interface shift I think we're going to see give us superpowers too.
Great. Thanks, Evan. How about you, Anthony? What are your thoughts?
I'd like to unpack the definition of the metaverse, because that's the biggest thing. It's like, to me, defining the metaverse today is like trying to define the internet in 1997. And in 1997, there was no Google, there was no social media, and Amazon was an online bookstore. So we all have ideas of what the metaverse is, and it's sort of formulating on its own. But it is something that you don't know what you don't know, and it's bigger than anything I think we can imagine. It's going to be how we learn. It's going to be how we work. It's going to be how we play. It's going to be how we socialize being the underlying framework to all those things. It's going to be this thing that's going to give people the ability to have experiences on the internet that it doesn't replace a web page, doesn't replace video streaming. It's just another modality to experience information in this new three-dimensional way. So it's a big overarching thing, and our view is that the metaverse is the internet. It's going to be just like every company has websites. They'll have their own metaverse destinations. They'll have their own microverses. It's going to permeate every part of our lives, and so we're going to see that, I'm certain, over the next 10 years.
Great. I think that begs an important question, right? What are the real-world use cases for metaverse today? And one thing that really intrigues me is that there are some things that we can see around us already, like in the industrial space, people who work in, let's say, smart factories, or in the automotive domain, or are big gamers. You can see how metaverse is evolving. But there's also a big question, elephant in the room, like how it's going to evolve and what are the use cases that are going to emerge. I'm going to start with you, Anthony, since you already started to tee up that topic on the use cases. What do you think are the biggest use cases for metaverse, and what's the time horizon when they're going to mature to be even more scalable and bigger?
So I'm an optimist, so just take that into consideration on everything I say here. But I was part of starting Cavernous almost 7 years ago with my co-founder, Nick Gebbe. And we had a vision when we saw these first VR devices come online, the Vive Pre, the Oculus DK1, that this is going to create a new wave of spatial computing. And not just VR devices, not just AR. It was going to permeate every device. It was going to be these new experiences. And we thought that design and engineering collaboration was going to be a slam dunk, because designing and engineering on CAD systems independently, the collaboration is very limited. We thought that was going to be the first big use case. And we're starting to see that now, but we were wrong. And we sort of evolved to learn that really some of the biggest use cases we saw in the very beginning, even 6 years ago, was for training. We have a customer, NCR. They make automated teller machines, and they wanted to be able to take their automated teller machine from PTC Creo, bring it into this spatial experience, which wasn't called the metaverse back then, and be able to train and learn and have technicians learn how to replace things, how to pull things out. And so it became this wave of training-like experiences in the metaverse that were social, so you can be in there with an instructor. And that was like the beginning of when we saw that this is a real opportunity and there's real use cases here. And training continues to be one of those real powerful use cases. But now we're also seeing enterprise collaboration coming around, where the pandemic was certainly a big tailwind there and helped people to understand that there's got to be a better way than just being on a Zoom screen share. There's got to be a way we can connect and create community and culture. And the metaverse is a great way to do that. It's a great way to connect and have experiences with others and create a culture. We do it in our company every day. We meet in the metaverse. We do all of our stand-ups, and it's one of those things where I look at it and say, could I live without that? And I can honestly say the answer today is no, because the amount of fun we have, the amount of communication we do, the amount of interaction we have in this metaverse experience, it's amazing. And we've grown our whole company that way. So that's going to be a really great place that we're going to start to see happen.
I just wanted to bring it back to the misconceptions, if we can, just to keep maybe the discussion going on that a little bit, because, you know, for me, people say, well, what are your biggest misconceptions of Metaverse? I always say there's several. It's not synonymous with gaming. It's not synonymous with Web3, right, in my mind. But people oftentimes say, oh, Web3 is Metaverse. And I think, well, that's not necessarily the case. And to kind of underscore that, just because where we sit, you know, working with large enterprises, you know, there's definitely a desire to move into a Web3 space, but nobody's ready to really jump in, right? I mean, we work with, not naming names, but a large retailer that wants to build their own private blockchain, for example. And I think, well, why would we build our own private blockchain? Why not use one of the, you know, right? So from a publishing perspective, I still think that there is a really healthy desire for publishers to own what they create, and that it not be as open, maybe as you just described. And I was just curious if anybody else had an opinion on that before we moved on from it.
Yes.
Heiko, does Epic or Unreal have a position?
Well, interesting. Now I have two streams, so I'm trying to bring those two together. So you mentioned gaming, right? And like with who I work for, obviously, we're very tight with that community and what we see. And I would say gaming has shown where those things can go and what you can do if you bring people together in a collaborative manner and allow them to self-express. I mean, at the heart of the games that you see right now is a means of self-expression. And I think any use case that tries to talk about the metaverse does really well when they play on that subject. Mm-hmm. And so anything that you take, and whether it's 3D or not, I would say there is something about human beings that we like to interact with things. And until we can replicate this haptic kind of interaction that we have in the real world, 3D immersive or streamed experiences is the closest we can get. And so I think from an industrial perspective, you mentioned training and simulation is certainly like the biggest piece where we see use cases emerging in tremendous ways, and I'm sure you see that on the cloud too. But we also see it in entertainment tremendously, like huge concerts. I mean, if you think about how fast an artist can become super popular through the social networks and the media we have right now, way beyond it has ever been before. I mean, you had to travel from town to town, set up your concert, kind of publish and promote endlessly. Now you have a new means to reach an incredible amount of people in a short time, build your background, build your presence, and then interact with them in a more meaningful way. And I think that are the best use cases we have right now, right, because they play on a need that we have. The more intricate you get on the industry side, the more difficult the definition of return of investment gets. Like, what does it take to build those environments and like put all the services together? Because like it needs all of us to like make something like this work. So it's not something that you just jump in, right? I mean, It's the same problem that you had with the internet 20 years ago, right? I mean, like, and then all of a sudden, tools show up that say like, oh, you can do that easily, right, and like everyone can do it. So we're on that path. But the real good working use cases that we have today are the ones that like show mass scale, reach a lot of people, or are very nuanced and small. Like when you talk simulation teams, they're usually small and interact in a contained environment. And so you have this disparity between really small and huge. But the mainstream thing that like works for everyone, those use cases are a little bit harder to find.
And that's where the biggest return on investment is going to come from, by investment in technology and so on. And it's not just the representation of the 3D data, but I heard it's also the interactability with that's going to drive the use cases. Evan, I'm going to come back to you for final thoughts on the use cases. But before that, I want to poll the audience with show of hands again. How many of us have actually experienced one or more of these metaverse use cases? Great. So quite a bit. So it's more real than anything else. Evan, any final thoughts on the use cases where you see the biggest drivers?
Yeah, I think the way we talk about it with customers is First off, separating Metaverse from real-time 3D, because they're different. I subscribe to the idea that for Metaverse, there has to be identity, ownership, transferability for it to be an alternative virtual plane of existence where you can have more meaning and impact and cause effect in a world, right? And then real-time 3D is in two buckets for us. One is fully virtual. So I'm going to design a car in a fully virtual space. I'm going to navigate a burning oil rig to learn how to escape in a fully virtual space. And then we have more of the location-based contextual, right information, right time, right place type experiences, aka augmented reality. The virtual ones are a bit easier to pull off right now because you don't have to account for the real world. And in that world, it's all about knowledge transfer. You know, if you're not doing training today, you are missing the boat because there's so many incredible ways to help people just have more agency in a world and then know how to do a thing better, and it can translate to anything. Like we spend all day talking about all different verticals and use cases there. And but I'm more of an augmented reality guy, and I think we're just now getting to a point where devices are good enough for certain use cases. And the way I describe it to customers is like, think of anything where you have a user in the field, and imagine if you could inject their perceptual system with just increased agency of any kind. And their wheels start spinning, and you have to pull them in. They're like, oh, well, do I have to, is it like AR or nothing? And it's like, no, it's usually AR and some other type of technology and some other type of change management. And the example I keep using as of late with people is for the first time ever, I think about a month or two ago, there was a completed surgery at Johns Hopkins for spinal surgery with AR. And the surgeon said it was like driving a car with GPS for the first time. And I mean, I think about how that can apply to anything you could imagine. And back to what I said earlier about like, is it a computer or a headset? And no, you don't think about a car or GPS. You drive a car with GPS, right? So there's these interweaving of these different technologies to bring these experiences to life. And so parsing through what those technologies are is something we focus on a lot in use cases.
Yeah, so let me take it a step further and Evan, tell us your thoughts on what are those technologies that you're talking about that are going to enable the metaverse with the many different use cases that we talked about, and where the biggest gaps are today.
So in the industrial metaverse, some of the biggest gaps are just computing power.
Yeah.
Right now, people want to render a car, render an oil rig on an iPad or on a small device, and you just can't do it. And so people are stopped in their tracks. And so how can we offload that workload to the cloud? Surreal's doing it quite a bit right now in streaming, but they're hogtied by us oftentimes because we don't have enough GPUs out there in the world, or they're not close enough to users for latency reasons. So this rethinking about how we deploy GPUs at what scale, how they get sliced up, how we charge for them is a major, it's not technical, it's a business model challenge too there. So that's on like the kind of just basic but still big problem front. The other main thing that's missing is just automation around creation of 3D content and 3D assets. People in games and visual effects are pretty good at this and have it figured out. And then you try to go to a company in the enterprise, you say, hey, you have to start looking and feeling like a game studio. Like, what does that even mean? Like, how do I even hire Unreal developers? Yeah. What does a 3D pipeline mean? And today it takes BMW sometimes 14 hours to take one CAD asset, use Unreal Datasmith to convert it, 14 hours. And they're trying to create hundreds of thousands of these things. So it's just this bottleneck. And so how do you automate that? Well, you need to containerize the application. Mm-hmm. You need to think about a serverless architecture where you're not having to worry about spinning up compute instances and managing them. You're just dropping that CAD file in a storage bucket. It's an event-driven architecture. Now it's spinning up that container. And now you're throwing 1,000 CAD files, and you have a ton of containers all at once, simultaneously breaking down all those files. You're going, I mean, we have a case study we did that's public. We went from 14 hours for an Unreal Datasmith conversion down to like 2 minutes. Yep. With this serverless architecture type approach. It's more automated. But then even there, that file comes out, the textures are messed up, the materials are a bit messed up, and you gotta have a human in the loop. sitting there fixing that thing, and it adds another bunch of hours to the mix. So what did we do there? We actually used SageMaker and had them give us a ton of data about other cars that were done right. We trained that model to recognize these anomalies and these errors and these gaps in the mesh, in the material of the model. And this now was an AI model that was applying the right color, finish, texture to the model, and you got a human out of the loop. Now, taking that into production and training that for every car is where the challenge now lies, but it's that kind of automation that people aren't doing yet, that we're starting to do, and people need to start thinking about more.
Got it. And Anthony, at Coverness, you're both the users of such technology and the creator of technology that enables the metaverse, right? Where do you see the biggest gaps and the enablers today?
The biggest gaps in?
Biggest gaps in technology that need to be filled to take the state of the industry forward.
So if we just come down to the fundamentals of what makes a metaverse happen, you have storage, compute, and network. And I think Evan hit on one of the major gaps, which is compute, because these experiences that people want to create and enterprises want to create with their own data could be massive. The amount of data is so massive that you can't even render it necessarily on a regular PC with a great graphics card. You may need multiple graphics cards. And so the delivery mechanism of these experiences to be able to deliver that to every device at scale is a significant task, and it's a significant thing that needs to happen over the next multi-years here. And then when you have a VR device that is untethered, that is got a mobile phone in it, it even becomes more difficult to deliver a great experience to that device. It was at one point VR devices were tethered to computers and you can get a really good experience, and now them being untethered, the only real way to deliver a high quality experience again is streaming. So what we're going to see is, fundamentally, you have two different paths to deliver these experiences. One is you can deliver it via these applications built on game engines like Unreal or Unity, which is always going to be the case, but you can deliver it as an application. But you also have this mechanism to deliver it as streaming. And the downside to streaming is it's actually quite expensive. If you start to do the math on it, multi-dollars an hour, and if you have lots of users, it becomes quite expensive. So you want, in a perfect world, I think you'd have this hybrid model where some stuff is being done application locally on device, some stuff is being done in the cloud, being streamed, and those are the kinds of things that we're focusing on as a company.
Yeah, I think a key thing there is you need to have intelligent protocols that can know where that workload should live in real time, right? Because use cases are going to vary, places you go in the virtual world are going to vary in fidelity, and you can't just always be rendering server side. You can't just always be rendering on the client. And there's a lot of people that believe that server side's never going to be the thing at scale. I mean, I think Tim Sweeney's a big advocate that where more innovation is happening is at the chip level on the client devices, and that's moving a little bit faster than what's happening at the infrastructure 5G server side level, which just requires so much more energy, time, investment to move and shape the physical world and to defeat the speed of light versus on the chip. And I mean, this is not, I mean, as a cloud guy, I hope and I wish and we'd make more money if all the workloads were on the server, but the reality is that the sleeping giant in this space is Apple, and the phone in your pocket is your little mini cloud server. And that's where most of the workload's probably going to live in 5 to 10 years. But you're going to all of a sudden jump into an architecture design because you're designing your house, and it's going to have to move all of a sudden to what we call local zones. And local zones are these smaller data centers in urban areas. Anyway, it's just something to think about.
Josh, Heiko, do you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I heard was the compute that's necessary. It's quite interesting what has happened with game engines, right? I mean, we can compute the equivalent of billions of polygons now. And there's a tremendous focus, and you mentioned that too, on the 3D side. I think the 3D side has evolved the most in recent years. I mean, the experiences you can show are incredible. They're mind-blowing. I mean, you see the quality rendered in real time is enough to go into a movie or into a TV show. I think what people most underestimate is all the adjacent services that you need to make these experiences work. Multiplayer, you can never underestimate what it takes, how much compute it takes to like bring tremendous amount of people together. And like what you usually see that like when we're talking about VR, it breaks down at like 10, 15. When you're talking about games, you're getting to 100. But if you want to do a press event, you want 300 people. If you want to have a meaningful concert, you want to have 10,000 of people. So how do you that compute? The other thing that what we see people underestimate quite is like it's a social experience. So there's communication on all levels, video chat, text chat, voice chat. We've seen experiences, quite interestingly, where 300 people create in the first 7 minutes 100,000 messages.
Wow.
Are you ready for that? Is that what you thought your experience would do? And how are you going to manage that? And then all the security issues come with that. And then you go right into like, what kind of standards do you need to communicate from one to the next to like enable all those things? And I think the discussion becomes way more interesting. Of like, how do all those components come together? What role does the cloud really play in bringing this together, whether you run it local or whether you stream it? And then what kind of quality do you need to be convincing? I mean, the range right now is from animation comic style to absolute hyper-realistic. And then what of those adjacent services work with one or the other? How do you bring them together? And then how do you share? How do you go from one experience to the next? So I think the biggest challenge we have is actually the standards. And like coming together and agree. Because like what you certainly don't want is a user to have to learn how to live in your experience in the first 10 minutes of every experience they go to. Imagine like you spend your day on the internet moving from one experience to the next, and you lose 5 to 10 minutes every time on a tutorial how to navigate that particular world. That's a nightmare. So how do you bring those things together? And that's what we can do here in this room, define how does that interoperability gonna strive and be evolved as a next step.
But also, we oftentimes see just the level of effort required, like you said, to build a multiplayer and ship something at the speed of marketing, right? Which marketing is driving a lot of the kind of the needs or the innovation around Metaverse right now. And it doesn't want to go that fast, right? I mean, it takes an incredible amount of people, tooling, compute, automation to build and ship a single application when you're talking about a multiplayer game. But it wants to be something that is responsive, that's dynamic, that is updating regularly so people will actually come back, right? And we oftentimes say this, like if you build it, they will come, like once, maybe twice. But when does the novelty wear off? And that is when there's nothing new to see. And so how do you maintain something at scale, where it does require a pipeline that's much more like a game studio or VFX studio that needs to kind of constantly ship. So things like source control and versioning, especially if you're shipping, kind of a multi-stream, whether it's, something where you've got an iOS or an Android app plus a web-based version, just maintaining kind of continuity of 3D data, right? What is the single source of truth and how do you maintain that across different deployments at different, qualities, essentially, too. So there's a lot of complexity and challenges to do this, in a way that becomes performant, and it requires, I think, we need to get a lot more developers, brands, companies sort of working on a set of standards that becomes more fluid. It can happen more seamlessly with right now. It takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing to add to that, because what you said last, really important. If you don't control your digital IP, or if you don't have a digital twin process, the gap between the market leaders and the laggers is going to be tremendous. Because building those kind of pipelines is what takes the most for any industry company. You mentioned that too. I mean, if you're astonished what it takes for an engineering company to really embrace that digital IP process and then use it across the board everywhere they can.
Yeah, if you're not going top down at the CEO level to create this change, you're not going to make any progress. And what we're seeing is that we're so close to making this happen already because 3D exists in a lot of industries. They use it to design their products, whether it's buildings, cars, planes. And today, that process is a cost center, right? That's pay for the designers, pay for the CAD models, and they create the product, and there's some value there, of course, but then it just sits dormant. It sits dormant, it's on-prem, it's across all those different storage systems, and you have someone in marketing say, hey, I want to go push out this 3D shoe or this 3D car. It takes them days, weeks, just to find that asset and get it the right person, the right format. And so the simple way we talk about it is you need to have a campaign in your business to democratize access to 3D. And you got to get to the head of design saying, hey, your little PLM process, we got to tap into it and suck data out of it. And what we're seeing is that existing tools and systems like PLM just don't work to have me in marketing easily access and configure and then publish. And so what we're doing a lot of is trying to create this layer of abstraction on top of these existing on-prem systems. So you can push data in, have that pipeline I mentioned earlier with the automated serverless type of architecture, and you're basically creating a mindset shift for the designer, saying, hey, I'm making this thing for way more than just the manufacturing process. This thing's going to go out in the world now in all kinds of ways. So how do and so I just have to change my workflow. I have to now finish the asset and boop, publish to S3, and then boom, let everything downstream flow to the people. And so this is this sort of idea in manufacturing called like the model-based enterprise or a digital thread. People have been trying to do it for years, but no one's really had a good reason to make that shift. Now we have all these amazing endpoints and consumer sentiment shifting. You now have endpoints, right? And like look at Nike with their, the Roblox. Is Roblox or Minecraft? Roblox. Nike's in Roblox. They're in Fortnite too. They have shoes there too. Okay. But I mean, they're thinking a lot about, okay, how does a designer create a shoe, and then how does it flow all the way through the organization for all kinds of things and get out into, as an NFT, into Web3 or into Fortnite.
I'd like to just add to this too.
Please.
There's an amazing opportunity for the metaverse to break down silos in these enterprises. So having been in this world a long time, Evan made some really good points about how it's really hard to get data from the engineering group. So the marketing folks typically wind up recreating the actual products from photos and hiring some outsourced company to go do that. But the metaverse, if it really takes hold the way we believe it takes hold, is that the enterprise can have all their functions in this experience and have the data shared between them securely, and being able to allow marketing access to this same data that engineering has just completed or the design team has completed, and then take that through into a sales experience. And so I truly see in the next, hopefully 5 years, that starts to manifest and happen in the enterprise, where this becomes the thing that breaks the silos down. Because the metaverse, if done right, is usable, it's easy to use, it's something that every person in the company can access, where PLM is complicated and it's all kinds of UI and it's just confusing. So the metaverse has an opportunity to sort of break down and let the data permeate throughout the enterprise.
Yeah, the one thing I want to add, just for people to be able to take to their businesses, go to your leaders and say, I have ways for us to turn our cost center that is 3D into a profit center or a cost-saving center, right? Selling more shoes, saving more time on training, all these different things, and that's how you can start to get people to wake up and start thinking about like ROI and real business reasons to do this, not because it's cool and sexy and fun.
Yeah. So for large enterprises, I think, Evan, as you said, and Anthony, you reiterated that it has to touch multiple different levels of organizations. For small to medium companies or companies that are sitting on the fence today in terms of their metaverse journey, what do you suggest their onboarding ramp could look like? What do they need to do? I think one thing you both talked about so far is just having that conviction internally that it's going to bring in more productivity or more business or many different facets that you can quantify. But what would that onboarding journey might look like? Heiko or Josh, do you want to take that first? Or
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of a broad question. It's tough to answer, but I mean, I think that the engagement model that we see in metaverse applications is so big that it can't be ignored. And I think there are tremendous opportunities for kind of SMBs. And these are companies that are, I'll say more like $50 million, $100 million companies that might be like a manufacturer of a cabinet or something like this, right? Where, they could lean hard into a 3D playable experience, a metaverse, if you will, and see real high return on kind of that engagement model through like where you have a traditional configurator for showroom design, where they can activate that locally or in their region, wherever they have dealer distributor, to create, again, a higher touch point, interaction where they can be co-present with people. So this opportunity to take a business back to kind of more of a main street, kind of bringing the scale of things down a bit to where you can be more personal with your customers, know more about your customers by how they interact with your space, I think is an opportunity for a company of that size to kind of lead into something that isn't maybe at the scale of an enterprise, where you've got to get manufacturing design all the way through these endpoints. But you can still create these highly immersive, interactive experiences where people will come in and literally, depending on how the event is promoted, if you will, get 7.5, 15 minutes of engagement. And we see people come into these 3D worlds and they'll spend an hour or more, right? Interact with everything that's in there that is designed to be interacted with. And because of the game analytics that you can track, obviously, there's a lot that you can do with that data, right, to be better for your customers. So I think, that does require that you lean into a 3D pipeline, real-time 3D pipeline, so that you can put these assets out, online quickly. And it doesn't have to come at some sort of massive enterprise scale. It can happen kind of programmatically, where you do traditional kind of POC development. You can test, you can validate, and then if it becomes something that becomes valuable for your business, you can invest more in it.
Yeah, I think if you take that as a starting point for a smaller company, is look at the cultural shift that is happening. And you could say for a long time, you could produce products in a bubble. You push them out. Maybe there's competition, maybe there's not. You create a niche, you create people that follow you and they buy. And the shift that we're seeing is that people want to be more involved. They want to have interaction, the contributions, and on all levels. I mean, there's a big track about sustainability that's happening and all those things, right? So people want to see that. They want to interact with that. What means do you have to contribute to that need and build a business model around it? How do you interact with those people in a meaningful way? Give them access to information that they otherwise wouldn't see. If you take the automotive industry, for example, mobility is changing in a tremendous way. Are people going to drive themselves? Are they going to be driven? Are they going to experience other things while they're driving? And so how do you cater to those? And how do you figure out what works and what doesn't work? And the engagement point is the digital world. You have a direct line to understand what they want and what works and what doesn't. And I think you should build your business models on that level and figuring out how can you get to that information, play with it, and start small. I wouldn't try to go in and how fast can I make tremendous amounts of money. That works for a few for a short time. But building business intelligence and value on those applications is what it gets you fastest. Simulation is a good example for that.
Great.
And bringing people in and interact with digital things before they exist, maybe capture mistakes long before you do that. Mm-hmm. Or another thing that is a mind boggler for me is if you take the HMI industry, human machine interfaces, you plan something for the future 2 to 4 years ahead. Mm-hmm. By the time you go live, any mobile device is going to be way far ahead because the iterations last year is the worst thing you can have. So what if you shift the development for those things into the cloud? Instead of saying, I'm limited to what I have now in my hands to develop, I develop in the virtual world, collaborate on something that comes in the future, interact with hardware manufacturers to build something that goes live faster with less iteration. Now I'm current. Now I'm right on the heart where the capabilities are of that industry is, and I can change the perception of where I am and what people can do in that space.
Great, well said. So I want to spend the last couple of minutes before opening up for audience's Q&A on what's your vision for the next 3 to 5 years, how the metaverse is going to evolve. Does AI machine learning have a role to play in that? Starting with you, Anthony.
Yes, it absolutely does. I think so we don't have a lot of time. The one most interesting area, I think, for AI to really help build metaverse experiences is the process of 3D content creation. You think about a game like Grand Theft Auto 5, 3 years, 1,000 people, 250,000 photographs of the different things that they're going to bring into the world, hundreds and hundreds of hours of video. That's a couple $100 million to build something like that. And I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see some amazing things, which we're already starting to see from companies like NVIDIA, where you're going to be able to generate these 3D assets in a much more automated way that's trained via AI. So think about what it means for the metaverse if 3D content creation costs come towards zero, which it won't ever be zero, but as it approaches there, it's just going to open up this experience and what you can do there.
It's getting close to generative art. You're seeing flurry and flourish now. I mean, it's getting close to zero from an effort, energy perspective. I mean, it's still compute costs and stuff, but it's happening.
I think we will see a lot more smaller teams create amazing experiences and applications. They have access to tools that no generation had before. at like cost levels that are unimaginable.
Lowering the barrier.
Yeah, the entry is like so easy. You will have digital humans. We will see a lot more digital concierge systems connected to AI and machine learning that like will allow us to interact with the things we know today way differently. Whether it's how you check into a hotel or how you have a conversation with a company, there's gonna be digital humans involved for sure. And now that it's so easy to create those in comparison to what it took, that's definitely one of the biggest pieces. There's a tremendous chance on thinking about how you play with diversity on that level when you have that tremendous volume of digital characters at your hand. And then like the world capturing and world building is gonna add to those experiences. It's so easy to do this now at the quality level that has never been seen before. And so with cloud computing interwoven into that piece, I think the power of small innovative teams is gonna like be at the heart of what we see in the development in that area.
Great. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, all good points here. I think you're going to see more tooling come online that's going to help cut down the speed of content creation, but I still think you're going to have this really human-centric kind of element that's going to be required to continue to push a lot of this development forward, especially on sort of the what, right? The what am I experiencing in one of these worlds, and at what fidelity, and level of interaction should that be? And I think that we're not going to be able to automate that, to the extent that I think that we'd like, I guess, at this point. So. I think enterprise is going to continue to drive a lot of this innovation as well, and we're fortunate enough to work with some pretty innovative companies, some of them sitting here right now. And I think that's going to continue to happen over the next 3 to 5 years. And then eventually, these tools will become easier, more accessible, for content creators to really help drive more content, which is what's required for Metaverse to really take off.
Great.
Next 3 to 5 years. I don't think we're going to have a metaverse within 3 to 5 years, but I think the building blocks are going to really mature. And so as I watch those all mature, I like to ask the question of like, when will we know that there is a metaverse? And there was this guy, I forget his name, I saw on Twitter, but he had a definition. He's like, the metaverse isn't a place or a thing, it's a moment in time when our virtual things, identity, relationships, assets, they mean more to us. They matter more than the physical ones. And I look at the trajectory of tech, and like that seems almost inevitable to me. I mean, that's already the case for a lot of people, especially gamers, and especially younger generations. And so what has to happen for those virtual things to mean more? You have to look at the real world. You have to ask yourself, what are the characteristics and properties of physical reality? And right now it's a tough time for crypto and NFTs, but the real world, everything we value the most is non-fungible, right? Our house, our car, our college degrees are all non-fungible things. And if things are not non-fungible in the virtual world, it's not going to have more meaning and matter more.
Got it.
And I think to me the metaverse is going to be this network of meaning. And so I think a network of what kind of meaning, because that's really vague. There's this fascinating shift happening in which the intangible is becoming tangible. And for all of humanity, actually, we've been really good at making intangible things matter. Pyramids, shoes cost $1,000, celebrity, brands. Right? These are all intangible things, but we can't quantify them.
Yeah.
We can't interact with them really or transact them. I mean, we can, but we can't transact them and quantify them. So I think what's fascinating is like with non-fungible tokens, you can now make the non-tangible tangible. You can quantify it. You can see it, interact with it, and you can trade it, and you can have just ascribed value. It has intersubjective value now. And so what does that do to the world? What kind of economy exists? This economy of intangible value now is going to emerge. It doesn't really exist today. You can't put a number on the Statue of Liberty, but in the metaverse, you can. And there's all kinds of markets and cool things that are going to emerge from that. And so that's the world that I'm excited about and very interested in.
Well said, guys. So making the intangible tangible, and in many ways taking the tangible from the physical world and digitizing it and bringing it into the metaverse.
But it's also the impacts come back to the physical world though, too,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
It's like I can make something intangible, tangible, and have value, but that NFT, that thing can be used to build a community of people who are passionate about cleaning up the ocean, right? And they can go raise money with smart contracts. Now they can go reverse impact the real world. And that example can proliferate into all kinds of things. But I think why this matters is because of the ability to interact, collaborate, create value, distribute value, and then have it come back and have an impact in the real world. That's why this space matters.
Great. I really had fun talking to this panel, and
Yeah, it was
I
good.
hope you did too.
Thank you.
Thank you.